Damon Rourke had blood on his knuckles and no idea how it got there. He stood still in the middle of a two-lane road somewhere outside Jackson, Mississippi, blinking under the flickering glow of a rusted streetlight, his badge hanging crooked on his chest like a lie that finally weighed too much. The night was silent yet alive, pulsing with a heat that felt like breath on the back of your neck, intimate, wrong, familiar. You're not watching a story. You're remembering something buried, something that shouldn't exist. Not on camera. Not in record. Not in the fragile machinery of truth we still pretend to believe in. He had pulled over the black SUV for a broken taillight. Standard procedure, right? Except the man inside was wearing full dress blues. Polished. Immaculate. A U.S. Army colonel. Black. Calm. His name was Cole. Thaddeus Kane. A man whose reputation was sealed in bronze long before Damon's voice dropped. But Damon didn't ask. For ID. Didn't ask where he was headed. He ordered him out, hand on his weapon like muscle memory had taken over, like training from somewhere darker had kicked in. And then something happened. The camera on Damon's chest, city-issued, always recording, glitched. Froze. Then hummed. Not just static, no. It hummed, low and guttural, like it was alive, like it recognized something it couldn't process. 3 frames disappeared from the footage. Just 3, but enough. Because when the video resumed, Cole Kane was on the ground, not fighting, not resisting. Smiling. Bloody lip, uniform ripped, still smiling, as if he knew something Damon didn't, as if he'd won. And then he whispered it. One word. One name. August. There was no context. Not for Damon. Not for the rookie who had shown up late to the scene and found his partner standing blank-eyed in the road, hand trembling. Over his holster, skin pale under the sirens. No one else heard it. Only Damon. But from that moment his world started peeling back like skin from sunburn. Too slow to notice, too painful to stop. His dog stopped recognizing him. His own father, deep in a VA home, called him by someone else's name. And one night, 2 weeks later, Damon's niece, a 3-month-old infant with no language at all, reached for him during a family cookout and said, "August is coming back." That was the last time Damon was seen in public. The arrest made headlines. Racist cop assaults decorated black veteran. A story America's always ready to share, always ready to forget. The footage aired on national news, but no one mentioned. The missing frames. No one noticed the timestamp shift backward. No one blinked when the dash cam recorded Damon arresting a man who, officially, had died in 2004 during a Black Hawk crash overseas. The Army called it a clerical error. The precinct went silent. Then someone leaked a file, redacted, cryptic, never confirmed by any official body. But it contained one sentence, one impossible line typed in red at the bottom. Subject Kane designated as recurrence, class the 3 anomaly. Monitor until August. You didn't come here to be entertained. You came because something already felt off, because you've been dreaming of names you don't remember learning, because radios flicker in empty rooms, because part of you already knows. The next time someone whispers August, someone else disappears. And as of this morning, another person has. Her name was Abigail Rourke, Damon's mother. She was last seen in her kitchen holding a landline phone not connected to the wall. The neighbor said she was smiling. The last thing she said before she vanished? He's almost here. Roll. The tape. The kitchen was too clean. That's what stuck with Delaney. Not the missing woman. Not the unplugged phone still humming with static. Not even the odd way the sunlight angled through the lace curtains, like it was staging the room for a memory no one remembered having. No, it was the cleanliness that turned her stomach. Abigail Rourke had always been messy. Messy in that charming southern too-many tea towels kind of way. The kind of woman who collected spoons and fed everyone even when they weren't hungry. She wasn't the type to scrub her countertops until the scent of bleach erased everything that made the place feel lived in. And yet, there wasn't a single fingerprint, not one crumb, Not one sign that she had ever existed in that room. Delaney brushed her thumb over the rotary phone's receiver. It was warm. The report said the neighbor heard Abigail's voice, but when Delaney replayed the audio file from the officer's vest recorder, just background noise, ambient stuff, it was wrong. There was a whisper, sure, female, soft. He's almost here. But in the silence after that, buried just beneath the digital hiss, there was a second voice. Male. Breathing almost. A ragged kind of rhythm. Not speech, not at first. Then, faintly, like a skipped heartbeat. She already forgot. Delaney didn't mention that to her supervisor. She hadn't mentioned a lot of things lately. Truth was, she'd stopped. Sleeping 3 nights ago. Something about the Rourke file wasn't sitting right, and it had started infecting her in small ways. First, it was her car radio tuning itself to dead stations. Then came the dreams, dull, colorless places where people she almost recognized sat across from her, smiling too long, asking her things like, "Do you remember the sand? The red kind?" And then there was the email. No sender, no subject, just a WAV file attached and the words, "They buried it in Mississippi." Not just the body. The file played backwards, and then she heard the name again. August. Damon. Rourke had been declared mentally unfit 2 months after the Kane arrest. That's what the official records said. Delaney found them tucked neatly between sealed psych evaluations and a single handwritten letter addressed to the man I used. To be, it was unsigned, but the handwriting matched the tags on his police locker. Still locked, rusting in the basement since the night he never came back from visiting his mother. Inside the locker, she found a cassette tape. Actual tape. Who even used those anymore? The handwriting on the label was shaky, almost frantic. Truth behind what no one tells you, do not play around mirrors. She played it anyway. And there, underneath layers of static and the rhythmic pop of old analog, was a voice. Damon's, low and cracked. But it wasn't what he said that made her breath catch in her throat. It was what she remembered hearing. Abigail. Didn't disappear. She walked out, smiling. Said she was going to meet Thaddeus, said it was time. And then, God, I swear to you, her shadow stayed. The light moved, but it didn't. It just stood there, watching me, breathing. I could hear it breathe. Have you ever heard a shadow breathe, Delaney? He said her name. Delaney dropped the recorder, but she hadn't met him. Had she? That night, she tore through every file, every case photo, every news clip. No trace of her name. She'd been assigned to the case just last week. She'd never spoken to Damon Rourke, but the voice on the tape said it like they'd known each other for years, like he'd been waiting for her. She pulled her phone from her jacket, opened her photo gallery. Half her images were gone, replaced with screenshots she hadn't taken. Grainy photos of small-town streets at dusk, a streetlight bent into the shape of an eye, a child's chalk drawing on a sidewalk that read, "Don't forget the August man." And one photo of her, asleep in bed, taken from the foot of the mattress. She lived alone. Delaney stopped leaving the lights off after that. 2 nights later, her neighbor knocked at 3:14 a.m., said he heard someone calling her name from the hallway. A woman's voice. Said he thought maybe it was her mother. Her mother's been dead 8 years, car accident, but she checked her voicemail anyway. 4 new messages, all blank, except the last. It was the sound of glass breaking, and then a woman whispering through static. "You left me at the river." Delaney hadn't been to Mississippi since college, or so she thought, but her phone's GPS logs told a different story. She'd made 3 unscheduled trips to Jackson in the last 6 months. No flight records, no rental cars, no memory. Just a trail of cell tower pings leading straight to an old bridge on the outskirts of the city. The same bridge Damon Rourke had stood under 6 days before he vanished, talking to someone no one else could see, mouthing the words, "It's not about time, it's about memory." She called in sick, packed a bag, got in her car. Didn't tell anyone. The bridge was quiet. Too quiet. like sound itself knew better. A crooked sign marked the spot where Caldron Kane's car was pulled over that night, faded now, sprayed with graffiti. But one word stood out beneath the layers of paint, burned deep into the metal like it had been seared there. Forgotten. Delaney stepped to the edge of the river. It was wide, muddy, endless, the kind of river that keeps secrets. Something shimmered at the edge of her vision, like heat waves, and then beside her someone coughed. She turned sharply. He was tall, gaunt, skin weathered like paper, wore a priest's collar but his eyes didn't blink right. Said his name was Father Jeremiah, but the badge clipped to his belt said, Department of Veteran Affairs. His voice was too calm, his smile too easy. "I've seen you here before," he said. "No," Delaney replied. "You haven't," he chuckled, like she'd told a joke they both knew the punchline to. "That's the thing about forgetting," he said, reaching into his pocket, pulling out a silver cross that shimmered like oil. "It always feels like the first time." Delaney backed away, but her foot struck something hard, half buried in the mud. She knelt. It was a military dog tag, name etched deep. Thaddeus Kane. But the back held something stranger, a date that hadn't happened yet. August 19th, 2025. Her breath hitched. "That's the day the veil breaks," Father Jeremiah whispered. "The day we stop pretending memory is safe. You weren't supposed to find this, you weren't supposed to remember." Delaney stared at him, voice hollow. "Who are you?" But he was already gone. No sound, no footsteps, just a slow wind through. The reeds carrying something that sounded like weeping, but never quite became real. She looked down at the tag again. It had disappeared. That night she found herself back in her apartment with no recollection of how she got there. Her bag was unpacked. Her shoes were clean. No trace of the river. But the photo on her fridge had changed. She used to be alone. In that picture, standing at her graduation, now there was a man beside her, Damon Rourke, smiling, and just below the photo, in faint red ink, one sentence had been scrawled. "Don't ask who August is. Ask who you were before him." The clock blinked. 14 a.m. again. Delaney's fingers trembled as she held the faded newspaper clipping against the fluorescent kitchen light, the edges curling inward like they, too, didn't want to be seen. Decorated colonel declared dead. In training crash, 2004. She scanned the article for the fourth time that hour, heart thudding out its own separate truth beneath the printed one. Colonel Thaddeus Kane had died. That part hadn't changed. The crash was real. 6 dead, all listed. The photograph showed Kane smiling in uniform, medals lined across his chest like a coded language Delaney couldn't speak. But then there it was, buried in the second paragraph, almost invisible. Body recovered but not made available for public memorial. She'd missed that before. Maybe it hadn't even been there before. That's how it had been lately. Details shifting, history changing its shape just when she was certain she'd caught it. But this time, it felt final, solid, a truth unearthed. If the body was never seen, maybe Kane hadn't died. Maybe he faked it. Maybe the man in the footage was him, real and breathing and walking proof that Damon hadn't lost his mind but had stumbled into something military, something classified, something fixable. She felt for the first time in weeks like she had footing. The next step seemed obvious. Find the crash site. Find Kane's records. Trace the lie back to where it started. She filed a FOIA request under her badge number and waited 2 days, unusually fast, before receiving a manila envelope hand-delivered by someone in an unmarked vehicle. No return address, no explanation. Inside, one file sealed with red wax. Her name was typed across the top. Not Kane's. Hers. Inside, 6 photographs. The first was of her, standing at a gas station in Arkansas, dated July 2019, 4 years earlier. She had no memory of the trip. The second showed her and a man she didn't recognize, walking near a military checkpoint. The third, A hand-drawn map with August River site, scrawled across the top in handwriting that matched her own. The fourth was of a burnt file, only the edges legible, but just enough to catch her badge number and the words, "Subject may retain memory loops. Observe reactions in isolation." The fifth was worse, a still from CCTV footage. She was in a hallway, arms tied to a gurney, mouth open in what looked like a scream. Behind her, blurry and half-obscured, was a man with no face. The sixth photo was black, no image, no data. Just a sticky note on the back that read, "This is the one." You forgot. Delaney didn't sleep that night, not because of fear, but because something was cracking loose behind her eyes. An image, a scent, a word just at the edge of forming. And when she closed her eyes, she saw fire. Wet fire, somehow. She heard a song, tinny and childlike. And she saw a boy, not Damon, not Kane, but someone else. Someone she'd seen once before in a memory she didn't realize she'd buried. And that's when she remembered the field trip, 3rd grade, an old military museum on the edge of town. It was closed now, fire damage, they said, but she remembered walking into a room marked unrecovered incidents and staring at a glass case that held nothing but a cracked radio and a weathered army badge. The name on the badge? Kane. The guide said it was from a soldier they never officially identified, that the body they found was too badly burned. But the badge had survived. She remembered pressing her hand to the glass, hearing a faint hum, like the device inside still lived. Later that night, she had a dream about a man with no eyes standing at the foot of her bed, holding the badge and saying, "You came back wrong." Delaney had wet the bed. Her mother blamed sugar. No one spoke of it again. Now, standing in her bathroom at 2:47 a.m., the lights off, she looked into the mirror and whispered the name. August. The lights flickered once, then again, and then the mirror showed a room she wasn't standing in. It was the same hallway from the CCTV photo, except now it was alive. She could hear humming, not electricity, human humming, low and off-key, like a child keeping themselves calm in the dark. And then the scene changed. The camera panned, on its own, slow and deliberate, until it landed on a metal door. Placard read, "Memory Reprocessing, Level 2. The door opened by itself. Inside sat Damon Rourke, older, beard grown in, hollow-eyed. He looked up at her, not the mirror, at her. "Delaney," he said, calm as a whisper. "You've been here before. You were with me. Don't you remember?" And in that moment she did. Flashes, the two of them seated in identical white rooms, being asked questions by voices behind glass. The same question, over and over. "When did you first hear the name?" She had lied, repeatedly. And then, she was sent home, told it was part of her psych eval. But the ride home wasn't in a car. It was in a white van with no license plate. She'd been dropped off 1 block from her apartment, and no one ever followed up. She leaned closer to the mirror. Her own face flickered for half a second, and what looked back wasn't quite her. Her skin was grayish, her eyes all pupil. And for a heartbeat, she could hear her own thoughts being echoed back before she thought them. She stumbled backward, breath caught, lungs not cooperating. The hum grew louder. Then silence. She looked again. Just her. Just the bathroom. She opened her laptop, fingers moving on their own, and typed, "VA reprocessing experiments. Memory glitch survivors." There was one forum post, buried, dated 2008. Title, "You're not crazy. They lied to you." The post was written by someone named Rourke D76. It was long, disjointed, rambling, but one line stood out, boxed in with asterisks. "They make you believe it was a breakdown, but the glitch is real. The August man comes when memory loops become permanent. He doesn't steal time, he repeats it, over and over until your body forgets how to be alive without the lie." Delaney backed away from the screen. Her calendar had changed. She'd written the date that morning, May 29th, 2025. It now read, May 29th, 2024. No apps worked. No messages showed. Every photo was gone except one. Her and Damon, both wearing hospital gowns, standing in front of a door labeled "Exit Only, Authorized Re-Entry Forbidden," and she was smiling. She stood slowly, walked to the window. Across the street, a child she didn't know stood in the rain, holding a chalkboard. On it, written in her own handwriting, "Don't trust the ending, that's how they trap you." Delaney closed the blinds, heart pounding, and then the power went out. The laptop shut down. The clock blinked to 3:14. Someone knocked at the door. She opened it. Her mother stood there, alive, smiling. "Ready to come home, sweetheart?" Delaney couldn't breathe, couldn't move. Her mother had been buried in 2017. Behind her in the hallway, something shifted. A tall shape, blurred, watching. Delaney's knees buckled, and just before the door closed behind her, the camera angle shifted. Security feed. Date stamped in the top right corner. August 19th, 2025. She'd already made it. But then, why? Was everything happening? Before that, the story wasn't starting. It was repeating. Delaney's ears rang as she sat in the dim light of her kitchen, the power still out. Her mother's smile burned into her retinas like an afterimage she couldn't blink away. The house was silent but not empty. Something lingered, just beyond the reach of sound or shape, a presence that bent the air slightly, like heat rising off pavement. She hadn't moved in hours, or maybe it had only been minutes. Time had loosened its grip again. She was learning to notice the cracks, how reality softened at the seams. She used to flinch at those shifts. Now she studied them, waited for them. She first noticed the others through dreams, not faces, symbols. The same scratched figure drawn on the walls in 3 separate dreams, once on a highway overpass, once on the back of a motel door, and once carved into the floor of a school she never remembered attending. The shape was crude, an eye with 3 lashes always dripping black. In the last dream, she tried to touch it. Her finger passed through the surface like smoke, and then a voice had whispered, not to her, but through her. "We remember the first version of you." She started waking with things in her hands, objects that didn't belong to her. A broken dog tag with a name she didn't recognize, a page from a children's book she'd never read, and a Polaroid of a man in a military uniform, his face blurred but his name stitched clear. Kane. She burned the photograph. It reappeared under her pillow the next night. That's when she realized the watchers had been trying to help, or warn. They didn't speak directly, but they were there. A network that existed outside of memory, trapped like her in loops, nudging, pushing. She checked old forums, dark web caches, even Usenet archives, tracing references to August re-entry, convergent fractures, and ghost pulse syndrome. Most had been wiped or overwritten, but one survived, buried under the metadata of a video labeled Lost Dog, East Nashville, 2003. The video was just 6 seconds, a flickering street, a child's voice singing "This Old Man," but layered underneath in static bursts, a second audio track, someone whispering coordinates. Delaney plugged the coordinates into her map, an abandoned storm bunker under a closed middle school in Alabama. She went. The hatch was open. Inside, the walls were covered in writing, names, numbers, phrases in multiple languages. But there was one phrase repeated over and over again, in blood or something like it. "You were right all along." Underneath, in a corner untouched by the decay, was a pile of folded notes, labeled by year. The most recent said, Delaney. 2025. Do not trust the repairman. She hadn't told anyone she'd called a repairman for the broken security system in her apartment. He hadn't come yet, but the note had a photograph paperclipped to it, a photo of her sitting on her bed. Last night. The angle was from inside her closet. That was when she began to accept something unspeakable. She wasn't just the subject of this thing, she was being observed, and not just by watchers, by recorders. She smashed her closet open, empty, except the wall at the back had been peeled away, revealing concrete beneath, and on that concrete, scratched so faintly it nearly vanished unless the light caught it just right, were 4 words. We are the versions. She didn't know what it meant. Not yet. But she started seeing the phrase everywhere. Scratched into bathroom stalls, on gum wrappers, burned into toast once, literally seared in block letters across the bread. Then, the dreams changed. No longer symbols, people, familiar. Her co-worker at the precinct, Janet, staring at her across her desk and mouthing the words, "Don't ask about the 6th floor." Her ex whispering her old badge number while asleep. A man in a hoodie following her to her car, only to vanish as soon as she turned around. And once, she swore, she saw Damon on a train, looking 20 years older, his eyes locked with hers through the window, mouthing one word, reverse. She looked into police archives, found a report she was never meant to see. Recovered subject, Rourke, D-repeating memory pattern, version 7. Prognosis, unstable. Monitor interactions with subject D45, Delaney. Risk, recursive contamination. She wasn't just observed. She was designed. The sickening thought uncoiled itself behind her eyes. What if all the footage wasn't surveillance? What if it was playback? She found another file, misfiled under a fake case number. Grainy black and white footage from 2003. A woman being interrogated. No sound, but her face was unmistakable. It was her, not similar. Her. 22 years ago. Different haircut, but unmistakably her. The tape was labeled just Subject 1, Echo State Recovery Attempt, Darver 2, declared incomplete. She had always believed her life began at 13. Everything before that was fog. A bad accident, her mother said. But what if that wasn't trauma? What if that was version control? What if the others, whoever they were, had been cycling through her life, changing events, rerouting choices, trying to perfect something? And each time she broke or remembered too much, they rolled it back. They couldn't erase everything, not the Watchers. They had learned to embed symbols in the cracks. And then finally Delaney met one. Not in person, on the radio. She was driving through Tennessee, chasing another lead that had already gone cold. An old war buddy of Kane's who turned out to be a priest who had no memory of service. Her car radio fizzled, cut to silence, then played a single message on a loop. It was her voice. Delaney, if you're hearing this, it's already reset. This is version 9. Don't trust mirrors. Don't trust exits. And if someone calls themselves the observer, don't let them finish their sentence. That's how they tag you. Then silence. She stopped the car, walked into the nearest diner. Everything inside was frozen, literally motionless like paused footage. A man sat at the counter, unmoving. A waitress held a coffee pot in midair, and at the back, in a booth with a single empty plate, sat a man in a black hat. He turned, smiled. He looked familiar. Delaney approached, sat across from him, her skin prickled. "You think you're the first version to get this far?" he asked. She said nothing. He reached into his coat and slid a folder across the table. Inside were photographs of a dozen people. All her, different settings, different timelines. "This is you," he said. "But they only let you remember one at a time. The others are stored. Somewhere between memory and programming. Every so often one slips, and that's when we see it." "We?" she asked. He smiled again. Then everything around her disappeared. The table, the diner, the man. She was in her car again, parked in the middle of nowhere. The radio was playing static. The timestamp on her phone now read, August 19th, 2025. The date she thought was in the future, but now it was today. Back at her apartment, a note had been slipped under her door. No envelope, just one line. "You've almost remembered everything. We're waiting." And the handwriting, it was hers. "Certainly. Here's the next chapter toward the story's emotional climax, written as requested. Deeply psychological, personal, and unresolved. ending with the haunting closing line you've specified. Delaney hadn't spoken in 3 days, not because she couldn't, because language had started to feel counterfeit. Each word tasted like it had been placed there by someone else, rehearsed before she ever thought to say it. Every phrase carried echoes of voices she didn't remember hearing but knew too well. And in those 3 days of silence, the world had shifted again. Not dramatically, not in a cinematic crash, but like a dream slipping out of place, a hallway longer than it should be, a door closing before you reached it, someone calling your name in a voice you know is yours but never remember using. The note had been right. She'd almost remembered everything. But the almost was the trap. It was the hour before dawn when she found herself back where it started, the woods behind her childhood home in northern Mississippi, a place she hadn't thought of in years, if ever. But the dirt path felt too familiar, the scent of wet pine and rusted metal too exact to be coincidence. Something here was anchored in her, the original fracture. Her boots crunched across dried needles as she pushed through the undergrowth, toward the clearing. There, half buried in the soil, was a metal hatch, the kind used for storm shelters just like in Alabama. But this wasn't the same place. This one pulsed with memory, not a memory she had, but one her body held, her. Fingers trembled as she unlatched it. When it opened, the first thing she noticed was the warmth. The second was the voice. A child's voice, hers, reciting numbers. Again and again, like a nursery rhyme. 14, 19, 7, 14, 19, 7. It wasn't audio, it was inside her skull. The voice stopped when her foot hit the bottom of the steps. The room was dimly lit by old emergency lights, most flickering or dead. On the walls, sketches. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands, layered over each other. Faces, symbols, a recurring shape that looked like the human brain split in half, mirrored like wings. And then, in the center of the room, a chair. Not a normal chair, the kind used in psychiatric facilities circa 1970s. Rusted leather straps, dried blood on the arms, and next to it a folder open with her name typed at the top. Not Delaney Rourke, just Guy Subject Delta. The file was clinical, devoid of empathy. Descriptions of coherence degradation, hallucinogenic overlays, synthetic memory implant failure. But one line caught her breath mid-chest. Subject retains high-level self-awareness despite recursive memory pruning. Recommend partial reabsorption into observer thread. She didn't understand all of it, but she understood enough. She hadn't been living a life. She'd been surviving a test, a repeated stress scenario, a maze built around the architecture of grief and trauma, run so many times her mind had started peeling at the corners. And the watchers, the dreams, the symbols, the glitches weren't enemies. They were echoes, past versions of herself, failed recoveries, sacrificed realities trying to break through. The choice wasn't to escape. The choice was whether to, finally, accept what she was. And that's when the man in the black hat stepped into the room again. Only this time he didn't speak. He held out a device. Small, silver, no larger than a cigarette lighter. There was only one button on it. No label, no context. Just a look in his eyes that said, "You already know what it does." Delaney didn't move. "Is this the reset?" she asked. His expression didn't change, but she noticed something now that hadn't registered before. His hands shook. Not from fear, but effort. Like it was taking everything in him not to. "Intervene." "What happens if I press it?" she whispered. The man only said this. "That depends on whether you believe what you've lived was ever real." She laughed. It came out hollow. None of it was, right? And then the pain hit. Not in her body, in her mind. A searing flood of images too fast to focus. A child crying in a white room. A woman's scream muffled by water. Blood in the shape of a key. Damon's face before the light left his eyes. Her mother saying, "You were never supposed to stay here this long." The man's face cracked finally. "She begged us not to do it this way," he said. "She said you'd survive, but not intact." Who? Your mother. Delaney staggered back. No, she died. I watched her. You watched one of her, he said. The real version never left this place. She was the first one to break the cycle. She gave up her thread so you could keep running. And suddenly everything broke open inside her, not with logic, but with grief. A recognition of pain so old it had stopped having a name. She wasn't meant to know this. Not because it was dangerous, but because it was too human. Because the truth was, this wasn't about control. It was about loss. The machine wasn't erasing her to hide secrets. It was trying to save her from them. Delaney fell to her knees. The man stepped forward, placed the device in her palm. He was crying now, too. You can go back, he said. To what? She asked. He shook his head. To whichever version still believes it can matter. She thought of Damon, of her mother, of the quiet, lonely ache that had followed her through every layer of this story. And for the first time she wondered, what if she had been the one running the test? What if everything she had seen was what it looked like to survive something that should have broken her? She looked up at him. I'm tired. So was she. Delaney stood holding the device. Her thumb hovered over the button. The room around her shimmered, not with magic, with memory. And suddenly, she was there. A different version of her, in the chair, screaming. Another version across the room, whispering numbers, and another curled in the corner, covering her ears. All of them, her. Every failed version, every story loop, every trauma relived, every memory erased, every truth buried. And, now, she could end it, or keep running. The man waited. Delaney lifted the device, took a breath, and let it fall to the ground. It didn't break. It didn't detonate. It just sat there, silent. She looked at him and said, I want to remember it, all, even the parts that hurt, especially those. His face shifted. For the first time, she saw it not as an enemy or handler or echo, just another version of someone who'd been afraid. I hope you mean that, he said. And with that, the lights shut off. Her eyes adjusted to the dark. The symbols began to glow. And from every corner of the bunker, voices rose, not in terror but in recognition, whispering her name. The walls pulsed like a heartbeat, and behind it all, one final voice, quiet and full of longing, spoke not to her, but as her. If this is the cost of being real, then let it break me wide open. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for stories you were never meant to hear. Until next time, remember, some truths don't want to be found.